Our studio guest joins us on a monthly basis. Actually, we're trying to do this where if something really big comes along, like if we have a new comet or something is happening up in the skies, we're going to have him come by more frequently. That's still the goal. Chris Anderson, of course, is joining us from the College of Southern Idaho and the Herrett Center.
Good morning.
And welcome back. We were just talking, last time you were talking about the youth camp, and you had that over the weekend.
Yeah, yep. Our annual science camp-in was Friday night, so that's third, fourth, and fifth graders. So yeah, it went really well.
They were excited, I'm sure, when
Oh,
they heard
and
this.
to me, obviously, since my a big part of what I do for it is the observatory. This time of year, it's totally a roll of the dice whether you're going to get decent weather or not. Well, it was gorgeous Friday night. Perfect, clear skies, nice temperatures, could not have been better. So it was really great.
Yeah, this is hopefully our breakout time of year. Now that we are into a tropical climate where it rains all the time, what a change. Hey, you've got a lot going on, obviously, coming up in April.
You bet. And starting with this week, this Wednesday. Well, actually, let me wind it back a little bit. You were talking about hot items in the news, and I don't know whether your listeners all caught this or not, but just this last week, a couple of amateur astronomers actually caught video of a meteorite or comet crashing into Jupiter. And they actually got this flash of something slamming into Jupiter.
Did they know what they were getting?
No, they had no. They were just taking video of the planet, and they just happened to catch us. And the great part of the story is one person got it, and of course one person gets it, and you go, well, who knows? Maybe this was some kind of a camera fluke or something like that. So the word went out to other amateurs saying, hey, did anybody else happen to be videoing Jupiter at this time? And sure enough, there was another amateur, and sure enough, that other amateur also caught the flash. So they're quite certain now. And of course, this is not unprecedented. Of course, the famous one was Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 back in the 90s that slammed into Jupiter, and Hubble got the great close-up pictures of all that. But it's happened a couple times since then as well. And the lesson seems to be, hey, maybe these collisions are a bit more frequent than we ever realized. We just haven't been as careful to watch for them. And nowadays, with the modern video equipment that amateurs have, there's a lot more eyes on Jupiter and other things in the solar system as well. So
7 billion people, at least 2 of them, will be looking at Jupiter.
Exactly. So the reason I think this is particularly relevant is because the astronomy talk that'll be this Wednesday is specifically about the largest meteorite impact in the United States, which most people are not aware, was right here in Idaho. So the talk's all about what's called the Beaverhead impact. And if you know your geography, you might go, wait a minute, Beaverhead, that's not Idaho, that's Montana. Well, that's correct. So that's part of the story here of why we call it, name it after something in Montana when it actually occurred in Idaho. But the talk will be on Wednesday, starts at 7:45, and it'll be in the planetarium. Now, normally we're closed on Wednesday night, so the museum won't be open until 7:30 for folks to come in and get their tickets to see the program. And as long as the weather holds, we'll have observing afterwards as well. It's the talk is $250 for adults, $150 for kids age through 17, and then 18 over as adult. And CSI students get in for a reduced price as well. So
and we often we hear the story about the Yucatan, but we've had these things hit here, Chesapeake Bay, southern part of the Chesapeake Bay near Norfolk, and in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at one time.
Yep, and for that matter, of course, the very famous one in Arizona. And there are others as well. I mean, southern Utah, folks are used to going down to the Red Rocks area of southern Utah. There's a very famous one down there called Upheaval Dome. And for a long time, people thought, oh, this is just a place where there's a salt deposit that got squeezed up from below. Well, the reason it got squeezed up from below is because something punched a hole in the crust to allow it to squeeze up. So
rather violently.
Yeah, rather so. And so, so there's a lot of these. But you mentioned the Chesapeake for a long time. They thought that the Chesapeake was the biggest impact in the United States. The one in Idaho is bigger. So, but it's also a lot older, so it was a lot harder for them to discover it was there.
And we just learned, too, not long ago that Idaho had a massive eruption, volcanic eruption in southwest Idaho.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, that was just the news as well. They're saying that compared to Yellowstone, 11 million years ago, the hot spot was under southern Idaho, and in fact, if you look at the geological maps that show you where the hot spot was, 11 million years ago, Twin Falls, Idaho was basically a giant version of Yellowstone. So
like looking at an old episode of the Flintstones.
Yeah, I was really sad though because in those news stories they kept mentioning Southern Idaho, but they never actually said Twin Falls. And I was looking at some of those photographs of the canyon walls. I'm like, I know where that is. Don't just say Southern Idaho. Give us a little credit here.
The only time we ever got it was when Knievel decided to make the jump.
Yep,
right?
yep,
So-
exactly. That was our claim to fame, like our 15 minutes.
We've got a bit more to talk about. We've got a short break coming up. Chris Anderson here from speaking of that, the website at the center, if you could give us that.
Yeah, sure. Herrett.csi.edu, and Herrett has both 2 R's and 2 T's.
And of course, people can see a whole schedule there of things that are going on
Absolutely,
as well.
yeah, not just in the observatory, but planetarium, museum, art gallery, all that. So
And help with tickets too.
you bet.
So that's coming up in just a couple of minutes. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's ahead of the month of April. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. 53 right now. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story this morning. Joined in studio this morning by Chris Anderson from the Herrett Center at the College of Southern Idaho. He joins us on a monthly basis on Monday mornings. Sometimes Fridays, though. We should point that out, too, as well.
Every once in a while.
9:44. And, of course, I've got 53 right now. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. On News Radio 1310 KLIX. And remember, online, you can listen to us anywhere all over the world by going to the Listen Live function on newsradio1310.com. You've got, as we said, much more going on. We just really scratched the surface in the last segment.
Yeah, one thing that happened right over spring break was we opened a new planetarium show called The Accidental Astronauts. This one's great for younger kids. It's an animated adventure with a couple of robot kids and their robot dog going on a school field trip, and hilarity and misadventure ensues. I won't spoil any more than that, but yeah, it's really well done. It's a lot of fun, and we showed that over spring break, and even though we're no longer showing the programs on the spring break schedule, since spring breaks are pretty much over now, it is still available. You can still see the show at various times during the week. So we're back to our normal schedule of shows at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays, and then 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock on Fridays, and Saturdays 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, 7, and 8. So
You probably got some stargazing coming up this month, too.
we do, yeah. Since this coming Saturday is the second Saturday, that'll be our monthly free star party, and that'll start at 8:45. If you've been out at all watching the sky, you've probably noticed this extremely bright object in the evening, quite high up in the eastern sky. That's Jupiter, and Jupiter is really great. In fact, I mentioned our camp-in Friday night. It was spectacular Friday night. You could see all 4 of the moons that Galileo discovered, and 2 of them looked like they were practically on top of each other, and then the cloud bands were very distinct, and so yeah, it was really nice.
Is it true that, when people talk about, we hear Montana called Big Sky, but when you come out to this part of the country, that it is actually better to view what's going on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I spent most of my early life in the Midwest, and you're down close to sea level, so you're looking through a half a mile more atmosphere. I mean, that right there is.
And we don't think about it, but there's something, a lot of material in that half mile.
Absolutely. And all it takes is water vapor. I mean, that's one of the biggest things for absorbing starlight is water vapor. And if you've ever spent a summer in the Midwest, they have no shortage of water vapor in the air.
All comes out of Minnesota.
So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. When I first moved to Twin Falls, which was 20 years ago, one of the first things I did was start sort of exploring what I could see that I'd never been able to see before, and I started sort of making a bucket list of all the things that I'd wanted to see in the past but had never been able to because the sky conditions simply didn't permit it. So I was able to see the planet Uranus naked eye. I was able to see the brightest asteroid naked eye. And those were just from a few miles outside Twin Falls. So.
And that extra few thousand feet helps.
It absolutely does. The joke astronomers make is that doing astronomy from the surface of the Earth is like bird watching from the bottom of a swimming pool. So,
can we see the aurora borealis from Idaho?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, we had a really great display in the early 2000s. That was a solar maximum year. Now, unfortunately, this last solar maximum that we're just on our way out of right now was one of the weakest solar maxima in the last century. And so, when the solar maximum is weak, there's just fewer particles coming our way to produce those auroral displays. So we didn't really get a very good solar cycle this time around, and therefore there weren't that many great auroral displays. But you never know. I mean, solar cycle occurs every 10 and a half years, so we'll just wait till the next one and see if it's going to do better. It almost certainly has to. Like I say, this one was such a low solar cycle that regression to the mean says it has to be a better one next time, probably. So
now that I've gotten Chris completely off track. I know you actually had more on your schedule, though.
Yeah, no, I also wanted to mention that if you come to the museum right now for the art gallery, you're going to have to wait a few days because right now they're installing the annual CSI student exhibit. And if you've not been to one of these before, it's, for a 2-year college, we get some really amazingly good artwork out of the students here. And I think a lot of it's because we do have a lot of non-traditional students, not just the kids that are fresh out of high school, but folks that have, gone back to school years later and maybe have a few more life experiences that may inform their art and their artistic sensibilities. So yeah, in fact, just this last week they were doing the jury process for picking whose works are going to appear, and that'll open on the 12th, and there'll be a reception that night as well. Free reception starting at 7 o'clock with light refreshments. Everyone's welcome to come and see the art and meet the students whose art got into the exhibit, and that'll run pretty much through the rest of the springtime. So.
And sometimes you can find things there that really surprise you. I mean, how well done they are.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and sometimes they're for sale as well. So if there's one that really catches your eye and you want to purchase it, that's often an option as well.
When I was young, working as a young reporter, a friend of mine who was a very talented artist literally got one of his pieces, one of his works, into a large exhibit at a museum that had once housed Yoko Ono's work.
Wow.
So I got invited to go to the reception, and I was standing there. I was introducing him to a group of people I worked with from the radio station, but unbeknownst to us, he had a little bit too much champagne, and he nearly knocked an expensive vase off.
Oh dear.
Because they had one of the biggest collections of these vases from around the world, artistic vases, and some enterprising woman that I worked with caught it. And
Oh.
I thought if he had broken that, he never would have been invited back. I'm sure that would have been the result. But we do have a lot going on there. And of course, this time of year too, the students are wrapping up their time, but the Herrett Center just continues to. I mean, it's not like you close the doors and go away.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, in fact, this is our busy time of the year because of the school groups. We have a lot of, the teachers that bring their kids on field trips. So yeah, it's often a very busy time during the week. But yeah, no, we continue after the school season's done. We're into our summer season, and we have a different summer show schedule for our planetariums, additional shows during the week, recognizing the kids are out of school. Once we get past Memorial Day, we have our solar viewing sessions every Wednesday afternoon for folks to watch what's happening with the sun. And this is a little bit of a preview of coming attractions because I'll be back to talk about this next month. But we've got a fairly rare event coming up next month. Mercury is going to pass directly between the Earth and the Sun, producing a little black silhouette tracking across the Sun for several hours in early May. So we'll be open for that as well.
It won't be big enough then for like an eclipse of any kind.
Well, it's a micro eclipse would be a good way to think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it'll just look like a little tiny black ink drop moving across the sun, and that means you will have to have special equipment to do it. This is not something you can obviously you can't see naked eye because you'd be having to stare at the sun. But even if you could somehow do that without damaging your eyes, Mercury would be too small for you to see. So you definitely have to have some magnification, and therefore you have to have optics that are properly filtered so you can do this safely. But
I worked for 7 years, for better or worse, with David Schumacher, who,
oh sure,
when he had worked at CBS News during a big eclipse in the late 60s, early 70s, he was sent to Mexico to cover it because they thought they would get a better look at it.
Right.
And I was at lunch one day with him, and I said, I remember that story. I said, because I was watching with my folks at home, and you had mentioned birds actually stopped singing, and and cattle went to sleep, and because it was so dark there.
Yep.
And his only response was, "How do you remember that?" But we can see that happen sometimes. We don't tend to think of nature being impacted, but they go by the cues, don't they?
Absolutely. And in fact, that's another preview of coming attractions. And I've been trying to get the word out on this for some time now. We're going to have a total solar eclipse in Idaho next year. Next August. So not this coming, not in August of 2016, but August of 2017. It will not be total here in Twin Falls, however. So I'm telling everybody, do what you have to do. The nearest place in Idaho where you'll be on the center line is well, I shouldn't say that. The nearest place in Idaho where you'll be on the center line and the weather prospects are good. In fact, as good as you can find in the country is out near Rexburg. And so, it's a day trip for us. Consider that, already along the entire eclipse path from Oregon to South Carolina, hotels are booked solid and have been since this last summer. People are coming from all over the planet to see this as it's right in our backyard. So I keep telling everyone, it's like, plan to take the day off work, plan to pull the kids out of school. It's like I normally don't advocate missing school, but for this, it's worth it.
Once in a lifetime for
many people it will be, unless you make the effort to travel to the ends of the earth to see it otherwise. I mean, there will be another one in the United States in 2024. but the closest it's going to come to us will be Texas. So, a lot more convenient to drive to Rexburg than it is to go to Texas.
All the diners in Rexburg right now, or the diner, is like prepared for this,
Oh yeah, I would hope so. And then
hiring extra staff. And
Eastern Oregon's another good spot for it. So I know folks that are planning to go there. So yeah, it's gonna be a big deal. They're calling it the Great American Eclipse because it's gonna go all the way, like I say, all the way across the country from Oregon to South Carolina. So
got about 5 minutes left. Anything else that you have to touch on?
that's about it, actually. Just uh, so hope folks will come by. And I mentioned the new program before, but I can tell you the times. Accidental Astronauts, the show about the robot kids and their robot dog. That show's on Saturdays at 2:30. And for those who are more into the music and entertainment shows, our Pink Floyd The Wall show is back on our schedule at Fridays at 8 o'clock. So that's a
It's a
fun one.
generational thing. Some of us would, that appeals to us.
Oh yeah, well, and I should also point out, people often ask, well, how long are the programs? Most of these shows are between 30 and 45 minutes. Pink Floyd The Wall is the entire double album from start to finish. It's the longest planetarium show we've had here, and so if you're a big fan of Pink Floyd, you don't want to miss that one. So
Well, let's get back to these super volcanoes for a minute, since we got off on that a few minutes ago.
sure.
We were talking during the break about what would happen if this thing ever goes up in Yellowstone, and everyone here is familiar with that because while it may not happen in our lifetimes, everyone knows that we really wouldn't have much of an inkling of what was going on. It would be that quick here, that fast.
Yeah,
But the one that was, as you mentioned, in the Twin Falls area from, was it 11 million
11
years?
million years ago. Yep.
That's dormant to the point now where we're not really worried about something like that going off.
Yeah, so the best way to think about it is that the hot spot, that is now migrated to Yellowstone, although more accurately would be to say that we've migrated over it, right? So 11 million years ago, Twin Falls was over the hot spot, and now the continent has drifted to the west to put Yellowstone over the hot spot. But as a result of the hot spot having moved through southern Idaho, it basically thinned the crust. Sort of. So there was probably mountains here before the hotspot came through. Thinned the crust enough that it makes it much more prone to seismic activity. So in effect, it leaves this sort of earthquake-prone swath behind it as it moves through the continent. And so as a result, I mean, that's why we have, if you go up to, Shoshone, you can see those lava flows up there that are only 8,000 years old. That's, a week ago Tuesday in geologic time. So we're basically still in a geologic or a volcanically active area. Does that mean an eruption could take place tomorrow? No, it means that we'd probably have plenty of warning. But if you go up and talk to the rangers at Craters of the Moon, they will tell you that yes, it's possible for eruptions to continue to occur up there for the foreseeable future. We'll get warning, we'll get seismic indications of that, but it's not impossible that we could have eruptions at Craters of the Moon.
And they're not always violent. You think about Hawaii. They had the one volcano that was just a very slow, the lava oozing out and coming down, and they had time to pack up people and move entire towns.
And that's exactly what we would expect here, because we're getting these lavas that have not been in contact with seawater, and therefore they don't have all these trapped gases in them. They don't produce this explosive result when they come to the surface. It's a much more gentle type of eruption. So yeah, the Hawaii is a perfect analogy for what we would expect to see here. Not these giant, conical mountains spewing that sort of thing, but just more like a crack in the ground opens up and lava flows out along the ground. I mean, that's a lot of what the flows up around Craters of the Moon produced.
Now, when it comes to the canyon, and the whole plain really through here, this is a lot younger than all of that, right?
Oh yeah. So the canyon itself. I mean, you'll often hear people say, "Oh, the Bonneville flood carved the Snake River Canyon." Well, that's not quite true. The Bonneville flood widened the Snake River Canyon, but the canyon was pretty much already here. It got a good scouring by the Bonneville flood and by floods earlier ones as well. I mean, the Bonneville flood occurred within the last few tens of thousands of years, but there were also several other mega floods that came through this area from other locations, from glaciers that released water up to the north, for example. So there was one about 100,000 years ago as well that came through here and carved through the Snake River Canyon too. So.
And I referenced the Flintstones earlier. There's a very funny scene in one of the Flintstones cartoons where they go to visit the Grand Canyon, and it's a trickle running along the ground. And Fred says, "Well, yeah, but in a few million years, they expect that it's going to be quite the sight." and that's the same idea. We started out small like that, and then it just carves through.
Yep, exactly.
And sometimes you get enough water going through that it speeds that process up.
Oh yeah. And in fact, if you go out to Celebration Park out near Boise, you can actually see where, as the canyon widened out, a lot of these boulders that had been getting carried along just got deposited. And there's these giant mounds of great big rounded boulders, and you really start to appreciate what a tremendous volume of water was moving through the canyon in order to carry rocks like that and just deposit them like they were, silt.
Yeah, pebbles or marbles rolling
Exactly.
through there.
Yep.
I've seen that up in the Adirondack range too, as well.
Sure.
It's the large boulders. We want to thank you for coming by. We'll see you in a month, maybe even sooner, depending on any big celestial event comes along. We'll be chatting about that.
Absolutely.
Chris Anderson joining us. One more time, the website.
That's herrett.csi.edu. And of course, if you want events for the observatory, it's 732 Moon. If you want events for the museum, planetarium, and the Herrett Center in general, 732-6655. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter, all the usual stuff.
All right, super. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to mention 10 o'clock news is just ahead. And God willing, if the creek don't rise, that'll allow me to come back and do this all over again tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.